Okay, I believe that we are live. Hello, Facebook. Hello, Twitter. Thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. My name is Nick Aldrink, and I'm the Programming and Media Coordinator with the Michigan and State Theater. Thank you all for joining us. I am joined by three guests. They are the filmmakers behind Making Waves, the Art of Cinematic Sound. But I will have them introduce themselves. Let's start with you, Midge. Why don't you introduce yourself for us?
Yep, so I'm Midge Costin, and I directed and produced Making Waves, the Art of Cinematic Sound.
Thank you. And Bobette?
Yeah, I'm Bobette Buster. I'm the writer and the producer of Making Waves.
And Karen?
I'm Karen Johnson, and I'm the producer of Making Waves as well.
Thank you so much to you all for giving us your time. I'm very excited to talk with you all because I loved your documentary so much. First, let's start by telling us how you all came together to work on this film and what united the three of you.
Well, I guess go ahead, Midge. So
yeah, so I worked in the film industry. I was a sound editor in big Hollywood films, and I at some point I started teaching at USC, even while I was working on films. And the reason I was so excited to teach was that when I was at film school, I thought sound to me was just, gave me panic attacks because it just felt like it was something technical you did at the end of a movie. And I came out wanting to be an editor. And then through a fluky thing of I was working as apprentice editor, assistant editor, and then I needed money to finish my thesis film. It was the only thing left I had to do. And so what I did was, as I always tell my students, I lowered myself and took sound job for the money. And then I realized, wow, this is like, because there I was, like the friend of mine who brought me in was someone that I knew from film school, and he had become a sound editor, but we had edited together. And he said, I'll cut the dialogue and you can cut the effects, because it's really easier. People don't know that dialogue even gets cut in a movie, but fixing the production. And so then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm setting the ambience, I'm setting the mood and the tone, and I've got to think of plot points and how do I do sound. And like right away, I started to get the importance of sound in film. But I realized that I didn't have educationally, I really didn't get that. I was taught more from engineering point of view. So I started to teach because I love teaching, and I started to teach even when I was working in Hollywood, and I just love to pass this on to students. And I really wanted to make this movie, but in the early 2000s, when I first started thinking about it and pulling it, looking and organizing it, it was like there was no such thing as fair use. And fair use is how you can use the clips. And I knew it had to be a clip movie because you don't get sound, you gotta hear it. And unless you had clips and you understood too, it's not sound for sound's sake, but it's sound with visuals in movies. And that's where, so I stopped the process early in the 2000s, and that's where Bobette comes into the picture.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to USC, the Graduate School of Cinema, and taking, I was in the producing program, creative producing, and the teacher of my film production class was Jay Roach, who's since gone on to great glory as a director of Austin Powers and Recount and Bombshell. But at the time, he was teaching us every day of the week, and we were making small student films. And one day he brought in David Lynch's film, The Elephant Man. He said, I'm going to teach you about the importance of sound design. What did we know? We thought it was a technical thing. And then Jay Roach began to deconstruct the brilliance of David Lynch's soundtrack as designed by Alan Splett. And you could see and experience the inner life revealed of the Elephant Man just through sound, not even through music. Music doesn't even come in until halfway through the film, when the Samuel Barber Adagio, it represents, as it comes in, the awakening of the Elephant Man's sense of self-dignity. And I was so blown away by the use of sound design to create the inner life of a character that it completely blew my ears open. And I was interested in development and screenwriting. And I began to watch all films with the point of view of how did they design the inner life revealed from many different angles. And long story short, I ended up teaching at Pixar and teaching a whole course on the importance of sound and storytelling as it reveals character. And who should be in the audience but Gary Rydstrom, who had 7 Oscars for sound design, from Titanic, Saving Private Ryan, his relationships with Spielberg and Robert Redford and John Lasseter. And so I was like, oh my God, what's he doing in my class? So I went up to him and I said, Mr. Rydstrom, thank you for coming, but basically, why are you here? And I said, if you don't like anything, just tell me. And he says, no, I'm thrilled. Let's go to lunch. And so I went to lunch with him and I said, hey, how come you guys haven't done a documentary like Visions of Light, The Art of Cinematography, which is such a phenomenal documentary. He said, well, we're kind of busy, but he said, if you do it, Bobette, and I trust you from seeing your course, I will introduce you, he said, to all the major players, Walter Murch, Ben Burtt, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, everybody. He said, I will back you on this. And so, I put together a little proposal. I said, what do you think? And he said, this is great, but the person you really should go to is Midge Costin at USC. And Midge and I had sort of a glancing nod to each other because the faculty is huge at USC. But I went to her and I said, Gary Rydstrom says, you and I should meet. And in the meantime, I was working with the head of the law school's entertainment law clinic, Jack Lerner, and developing a whole approach to fair use in documentaries that we took all the way to the Library of Congress. And he said, the lawyer at the Fair Use Clinic said, we will back you in getting your film together for a documentary. So with all this in mind, I went to meet Midge and brought this to her. And then I said, who we really need is Karen Johnson. So Karen, you want to come into how you came into the project?
Karen might have actually froze. I'm just letting her in again.
Well, I'll say while we're waiting that Karen the reason I thought she should come in is because she had done a very successful film on stunt women called Double Dare, in which she had to source all these clips, but she had to do it without fair use. But she'd done a masterful job with her clips documentary, interviewed all these major people who, including Zoe Bell, who was Uma Thurman's double, and working with Quentin Tarantino and all these people. And Karen had such an extraordinary understanding of creating a complex documentary with clips. She'd been very successful with the film, had won 5 audience awards at Toronto and AFM, American Film Institute. Karen, are you there yet? Anyway.
Yeah.
So Karen also was a lawyer by background. And so I introduced her to Midge. Karen, I'm extolling your greatness with Double Dare and why you came in. Do you want to fill in why you came into the project? Karen?
Yeah.
She's
good.
She looks good, but anyway, so I introduced her to Midge, and Midge, we 3 said, let's do this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was a long process. It was a nine-year process. So,
9 years. Wow.
Yeah. It was 9 years. So it was, well, you know what? It's hard to get, it's still, it's just something about sound, that people still don't have a lot of awareness. And I think also the other thing we had talked about a lot was that maybe because we get these big Hollywood names, everybody thought that they were all going to give money to the project, which we were lucky to just get them in the movie, let alone, and like Spielberg was so busy that he was just doing back to back films. So just to have them in the movie was important,
Absolutely. So Karen, can you hear us?
I can. I'm so sorry. My computer, for whatever reason, keeps losing Zoom. So I'm putting you on my cell phone now.
That's fine.
Oh, that's true of you.
So you've traveled all over with this film, which was released in 2019. I particularly wanted to ask about the Cannes Film Festival because this film seems like it would really play well with to an audience like Cannes. What was can you describe that experience and the reception that you received, maybe from other artists and filmmakers?
Yeah, I mean, that was so great because sometimes sound doesn't get recognized, and then in the Cannes Film Festival, the height of like all film festivals and film recognition. So we were in Cannes. The category that we were in was Cannes Classics, and it was just so exciting to be in that. And it did bring, I mean, the audience was, was thrilled with the film, and that was really fun. But just to be recognized, and then we did go around the world with the film in 2019. And it's one of those funny things. I think it's that, and it was so great being on the red carpet, because somehow our driver was late, and we got between Pedro Almodovar's crew cast, and so there are women going up the stairs with these big red feathered dresses and whatever, and here we are, this documentary film crew, and it's like, wow, this is so great to be recognized with all these amazing films at this great film festival. So it was really, it was a highlight of my life.
Yeah, it was definitely, we were told by the people at Cannes, who are the programmers, that they had to have the film. It was put on back to back with Easy Rider, and its 50th anniversary of Easy Rider, because they, and other classic films as well. But what they said was they wanted something that really extolled the magic of cinema. And they were just thrilled to see this new documentary come out that gave people a new view of, and everyone loves cinema at Cannes and in France. So just the feeling, the exaltation was extraordinary to be around.
Mm-hmm. Karen, I think you're muted. I think we were experiencing some echo, and I think you got muted.
Still, she's talking.
There you are.
Unmute or mute? Sorry about that.
You can hear you now.
Okay. No, I was just saying, we had that great segment in the movie that Walter gave us about, how he got interested in sound so deeply from European cinema. So, I'm sure that played nicely to your audience as well.
Yeah, and specifically the French New Wave. But it was interesting because we had originally thought that we were going to do make it much more international. But then we got so many interviews just on the West Coast, actually, and then New York. And so we ended up making it more American. But I think that it does capture a history that's, that's really important and hadn't been seen.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to give this moment to talk to Facebook and Twitter again. I'm talking with the filmmaking team behind Making Waves Art Cinematic Sound. If you have any questions, leave us a question in the chat and we will get to them. Bobette, I have a question about you're credited as the screenwriter of this film.
Yeah.
Karen, we're still experiencing some echo from you, so I'm gonna mute you again real quick.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Bobette, you're credited as the screenwriter in this film. I think that it's probably maybe a common belief that documentaries don't typically have writers attached to them. How did you set to write this project, and how did that process evolve as you had more interviews come in?
Well, it really is a collaborative process, because you are in the midst of, we had over 50 interviews, over 200 hours of material, yet you still have to have a lot of research. And both Midge and I, from our different expertises as professors, we had our own level of research and intensity of interest in asking the questions of the interviewees. And still, you have to have a structure or an idea of where the film is going. And we knew that we had an opportunity to show the history of cinema in an interesting way. We also knew that people in the Academy don't even know why there's so many credits in sound. And before this year, there were always 2 Oscars. People in the Academy don't know why. And we felt it was a really rich opportunity to, pull back the curtain and help people understand the complexity and the beauty and why there are so many collaborators and artists in sound. And at the same time, we had to find characters that people would like to follow. And so as we interviewed, we realized we had these 3 key characters, each of whom was sort of a mentor to the next, Walter to Ben, and Ben to Gary. And we also had an interest, which Midge can talk about, in not just showing white men's faces, sorry, but we wanted to show that there was a generational shift, particularly when Laura Hirschberger came along and a lot of people in Midge's era came along. And we wanted to show diversity of faces. So we were showing the history as well as the diversity. So we had all these strands. So we had many sessions outlining how are we going to bring in these strands so that we can create a compelling and interesting story that moves forward, that's not just episodic. So it was a great challenge, and it took us several years to pull it all together, working with the editor David Turner and with our consulting editor Kate Amon, and
Tom Miller.
And then Tom Miller, who came in as our supervising editor. So it was definitely, in documentaries, you have to work on an understanding of story structure and character and emotional impact for the audience. That's always the case. Mm-hmm. And then you work with the material you've been given by the interviewees. They say it's like getting a PhD. You have a thesis, but if you really know what your thesis is and that's what you deliver at the end, it's not been a real PhD. Mm-hmm. You're actually going off into the forest and you have an idea of something, and by the end you've gathered a whole new thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that the structure that held was the three of us got together with the editor. And remember that it was a spring break at USC, and we got a big room and we got these big boards and we put them up, and we just did the old, 3x5. It was really, I think we had, the sticky, Post-its, and we just put those up. And you know what, then those went into David's room. They were always in the edit room, and we would just, you just have to look. And the hard part was, as Bobette was saying, it was, okay, it's easy to follow the history, but I knew that it wanted to get the people in the the craft in there. And then also it was really important to get in the emotional, like what you put into, and I think this is true of any job, but just the emotional thing, that the satisfaction you get at a job, but really how hard people work, and that sometimes they're told that it can take on people. And one of the interviews, and I just want to say too, with the character thing, like we knew we'd be looking for characters, but when Ben Burt sent those movies that he made when he was a kid, we were like, this is gold. This is gold. And he's still like, a little kid. And like we interviewed him once, and he had just come back in the summer. He'd been traveling with his family to Germany, and he had tapes that he had, and he was all excited about listening to them. And then he had also gone hunting for a box canyon where they did the old cowboy westerns, where they shot, and they had the ricochets. And he found that he was trying to find that box canyon, and it was so crazy. And he played those tapes, and then he was like, "Oh, I have to wait," because they were so delicious to him that he wanted to wait and listen to them when you could really listen and take great notes and everything. It was just wonderful to see him work.
Yeah,
it was funny.
But what we also wanted to do was capture the magic and thrill of the creative process. And for many people that was a surprise who watched it, because again, you come in with the bias, so that sound is a technical thing, and you kind of have to have an engineering bent to enjoy it. But what we had hoped is that by the end, people's ears would be open to just hear movies in all their richness and design, but also to hear the world differently, because we wanted them to to experience the wonder of what sound can do in our lives.
Mm-hmm. It seemed like when you were especially talking to someone like George Lucas, they seemed to get really excited that you were making a movie about sound and sound editing and the importance of that. Is that how is that impression correct? They were all like really excited to do this.
Yeah,
with you?
Absolutely. I mean, George Lucas he actually gave the endowed chair that I hold to, that's named after Kay Rose, who's in our movie, the first woman to win an Academy Award for sound, and gave one also for music editing. But he loves sound, and it was so key in their movies, in Spielberg, in Coppola, that it was so key. And it was, along with Walter Murch, who we met at film school, and knew that this is like really important. And why they left Hollywood, because Hollywood was doing it. When I first started working in the 80s, I was working with some of those guys. It was like, we'd go on kind of 3 martini lunches, and they'd just like okay, just roll in the door with the door open and closed, and, just do the basics. And they knew that, this was a whole new thing. And, using sound and having it be as important as the picture. And so yeah, we were excited because we had those quotes too that all of them have said in one way or another about sound being 50% of their movie. So
well, one of the reasons why we took a while to make the film is because these major filmmakers all said to a person, this film should be made. So we had to wait for their schedules to open up. And Midge can tell you the Barbra Streisand story. I always like to tell the Steven Spielberg story. Steven Spielberg promised his great sound designers, Gary Rydstrom and who was the Richard Hebbs. He said, yes, I will do this. This must be done. And then he was busy back to back, as Midge said. And I kept calling his person. They kept saying, oh, he's so busy. Finally, they called and said he can't do it. So sorry. But we had a segment of Steven in the film where we had to have him sign off a release. He had to sign the release. So we locked the picture. I sent him the form. He gets the release. He looks at it and he says, wait a minute. I promised to be in this film. Why am I not in it? And the next thing we know, we're getting a phone call of, can Steven do the interview this weekend? And we're like, oh my God. So we said, yeah, yes. But we even geared up to do the interview, and then he canceled, went away, and we're like, oh no. And then the following Tuesday, he gave us all this great stuff. Midge, you should tell them about Barbra Streisand.
Please.
How surprised she was.
Well, that was a discovery that, so Joan Allen, was an engineer for Dolby and is in the movie, talks about Dolby, the importance of Dolby in the 70s. But so he was an engineer at Dolby, and he went to Ray Dolby and said, Ray, why don't we get involved in films? And because it was noise reduction and stereo in music. And Ray said, all right, okay, I mean, you go check it out. He didn't think it was a big deal. So Yoan goes to all the studios, and they all listen, and they say, well, it sounds really good, but no, we don't really need that, because you can imagine how much money it would cost to switch over all their theaters and everything, And so they didn't really want to do it because of money. And then that year that, what was it? Clockwork Orange. So
Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick was making Clockwork Orange, and then Barbra Streisand was making The Star is Born, and then a year later, George Lucas was making Star Wars, and but. So when they went to Barbra Streisand, so Stanley Kubrick said no, he wanted the system. But Barbra Streisand said, oh yeah, I definitely want that, but she didn't know that it wasn't already in existence.
Oh.
That she just thought she had an option. Well, the studio jumped when she said it, because she was making them so much money and her films were, she was doing so well. So she had no idea that she was part of it. So I wrote her an email and told her, and then she invited us to her home. And the cool part was too, the 3 of us show up, and we're in her, like, where she plays music and records music, and she comes to the door. Now, usually, maybe this is going into too much detail. Usually all of the big name people, they knew about the film, but they didn't know exactly who was who. They didn't know I was the director or whatever. And so we come to Barbra Streisand's door. She practically opens the door and she's going, girls, I have to shoot later. It's like, we know, that's why we scheduled it this day. And then she said, who's Midge and who's Bobette? And I said, I'm Midge. And she takes this thing, and it's like a piece of, it looked like a script, and she flipped it in my face. And she said 27 pages. Now, we always send all the actors, all the big directors, the questions to see, no, we're not trying to trick anybody. We just want to ask the basics. And here's the, and they never looked at it before. It's just for their handlers to say, oh yeah, they're legit, they're okay. It's 27 pages. I'm like, what's 27 pages? And she goes, answers to your questions. And she was prepared. It was great. it was really great.
It
So
was
yeah,
actually because of Barbara Streisand that she put her own money, like $1 million. So that's back in the day. That would be like, I don't know, 20, 30 million today, into a 6-week post-production mix, which had never been done before. And it was the buzz all over Hollywood. Can you believe Barbara Streisand's doing that? And when the studio heard the entire film completely mixed as Barbara oversaw it, they were blown away and they didn't make her pay for it. And that was the ground zero standard from then on of how long a mix session could take. And effectively, it went much longer. Certainly Apocalypse Now, it went for like 18 months or whatever.
Mhm.
But the point was she didn't know she was a part of history. And she was thrilled to learn this. And she's writing her memoir. And apparently we helped give her a whole
Right.
chapter.
yeah,
Oh,
she
really?
said, she said, I'm writing autobiography and this is going to be a chapter. We're like, yes.
Before we start wrapping up our conversation here, Midge, you have you mentioned that you've had a long career as a sound editor, and I want to ask if you have a particular film in mind that was your favorite to work on, or maybe that you had the most freedom to work on.
Yeah. I think my two favorite films that I worked on, one was Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington, and I think because their performances, but also it was a submarine movie, and it's so great because of course they're on stage and you have to create that world. And I think that so much of the tension and so much of their world got created by sound, and they're all in almost little boxes like we are. They're all like in small spaces and whatever. And so I love their performances. I also love the story because a lot of the times I worked on action adventure movies like, Armageddon or, Bruce Willis going to space with, and so they were just kind of crazy movies. And it's not really my genre that I like, but I thought that Crimson Tide was good. But the other one that was really great, and it was just before I got in the union, and I worked on Imagine John Lennon, and man, I just love that movie because we had access to the Lenono library. They just put they just gave us all their their library, and we could just
Oh
look
my
at that in
gosh.
our free time. And not that it was much, but and it was just so great. And one of the things that stands out in that movie, and I kind of show it to my students, is the crowds in that movie were always overmodulated, but that's how we heard them. And so when we went to, instead of replacing, it's like you had to leave those screaming girls, you had to leave those in like distorted, just like, oh God.
Yeah.
And then we added, more and kind of surround and stuff. But that was so interesting because sometimes you just really, need to keep that original sound.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like I could probably talk to you about that Imagine movie all day, but thank you so much. This movie came out in 2019. What have you been doing since this film has released, and what can you tell us about what's coming up from you all?
That's a good question. I teach at USC, and oh my God, this year with being online, but we're sitting on such an amazing, gold mine of interviews, and we had almost 200 hours of interviews and 90 different interviews, and so we have like amazing stuff. It's so we are talking about where we're going to go with that material, and I think we're all working on individual projects too. Not related to making waves, but the other thing is we're still getting, this film is showing all over. We're part of the American Film Showcase, which is through the State Department. Any embassy can, there's a certain group of films, I forget, is it 15 or 25 or something that they have access to. And so, I'm going to Kazakhstan next week. And I know Bobette's been to Prague and been to Germany and Turkey. And so that's just so fun to be doing that.
I'll be doing a piece in Uganda, and I did one in Ukraine. And the night before, CNN says Russia at the border of Ukraine. And I'm like, well, I'll be teaching in Ukraine tomorrow morning. We are in discussions about doing something with the interviews as well as a book on, the sound thinking. How do you become a creative in this way? Not, because there's plenty of information out there, even on YouTube with the technical side, but as all of our sound designers would say, it's not the technical, it's the creativity, it's the whole approach to what you can do to enhance a story and immerse a viewer into the story. And so we're getting a lot of requests to do special Q&As at length about this process and to do interactive discussions with the audience. So maybe there'll be a way to go even further with this in the future.
To stay up to date with everything new that you might be that's in the works, where's the best places for people to follow you and to keep up to date with the film?
Well, we're on, we have our own Facebook page and we have a website, makingwavesmovie.com. And we post regularly to our Facebook page, Making Waves Movie. So that would be the best way.
Okay.
And reach out to us through those. We also are on Twitter. So,
okay.
But mostly the Facebook and our website. So.
Well, I can't wait to see what else is going to come from you all. And I love this documentary so much. Thank you for making it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, I'm gonna log off of the Facebook and the Twitter. I just want to say thank you to everyone for watching the discussion. We had a few of you out there that joined in. And yeah, the film is still playing in our virtual movie palace for the next week and a half or so. So be sure to check that out. And we'll see you all hopefully at the theater again very soon.
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks, Nick. That was great.
Thanks, everyone.